So we're on episode 16.
16, yeah, we are.
So, believe it or not, again, we're back. So, first of all, what have we been up to this week, Rich?
Well, we've got excited. We've had a couple of podcast specials this week that we've recorded, which has been really interesting, really good fun. And one extreme of motorsport to the other. When I mean extreme, I mean an ex-retired racing driver, very famous one.
Yeah.
And somebody who's just starting off on the path of car racing.
Yeah, so we've had Perry McCarthy on. So I think most people that probably watch or listen to this probably know who he is, but he was most famously known in more recent years of being the original Stick.
He was the man in the black suit.
Yeah, Top Gear. So he did it for 2 years, and then decided to come out as such as the Stick. And it's a really interesting episode actually, because he explains about his career, how desperate he was to get to Formula One, how he achieved it, but pretty extreme circumstances. One little gem I'll mention is he lost his house over it, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
And somehow came back from that. I've probably not really ever met anybody yet with that kind of gritty determination in a belief.
He's pretty driven, you can see that now. And
absolutely.
He's 60, whatever he is now.
Yeah, and he's still got projects going on. He's got something
forcing his way forward, isn't he?
Yeah, that he's going to announce. If you haven't read it, he's got a book that has been out for quite a while now, but it's Flat Out, Flat Broke, but just really funny. I mean, you'll see when you watch, either watch on our YouTube channel or you listen on the podcast, just what a personality he is. So that was a real joy for us, because he raced in an era where it was Damon Hill, Johnny Herbert, Michael Schumacher, he mentioned Senna, so really cool to listen to. And then, as Richard mentioned, we had just recently somebody called Johnny Edgar, who is a Rebel Junior, on that programme he's just doing FIA Formula 3. He's right on the route basically to Formula 1. His aim is obviously to be the next Max Verstappen, so we've got our fingers crossed, so we've touched on that.
We'll get him back on when he's
when he's at
F1, when he's won the Monaco Grand Prix.
You never know. We'll explain later about who else we've got coming on. But so that's been a big part of our week. Away from that, I've been coaching in Wales, haven't I?
You've been coaching in Wales. I've been running a motorbike. When I say running, that's a real loose term. All they did was put tyre warmers on it and take them off. That's kind of And you had a chat. He did everything else himself.
You had a chat with one of your...
I took the credit.
Yeah, of course. You had a chat with one of
my heroes, John McGuinness.
Yeah, so he was there, whizzing around. How old is John McGuinness now, roughly?
Well, he's a little bit older than me, so 49.
Yeah, and he's still out there, still doing it. Yeah. He wants to go back and return to the TT, doesn't he?
Yes,
so for anybody that doesn't know him, he is a multiple TT winner. How many times has he won it?
I think he's won 25.
Yeah, which is pretty astonishing.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who's not seen the TT, whether you like motorsport or not, it's something else, isn't it? It's very special. But
it is.
So you've been doing that, and I've been coaching. I've been to Castle Combe, haven't I? I was meant to be at Anglesey, but unfortunately due to COVID restrictions and things, sadly I wasn't allowed to go to that. But things are easing, let's say.
Yes.
So we thought we'd mix it up a bit like last time. So we are going to start with a new road car discussion. So we want to enter a little bit more road car stuff. Driver tuition into this, as well as obviously the motorsport side.
Yes.
So
Well, I thought we'd talk a little bit about the Toyota GT86. Now I know you're not a huge fan, but I think you did a lot of stuff in the BRZ Subaru.
Yes.
And it was on track.
Yeah.
In
So
the States.
I was very fortunate to go to New Orleans with Subaru. And launch the BRZ, which is basically that, isn't it?
Car,
exactly, same car. But I admittedly didn't drive it on the road, so I drove it on a track. And being honest with you, on track, that kind of car, it felt dog slow, really. But bizarrely, great handling, fun, loads of feedback. So brilliant in so many ways. But I think for me on circuit, after used to driving faster machinery, it just needed a bit more oomph.
Well,
let's say.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, because I think Toyota and Subaru's idea with this car was to go back to basics. Because we talk about things like like last time on the podcast we talked about the 812 superfast Ferrari with 9 million horsepower, and you can't use those cars. Yeah. And the point with the GT86 was that it didn't have a lot of grip. It didn't have a lot of power, but it was beautifully balanced. You know, it had a lovely gearbox in it and everything else. So on the road, you know, it worked really, really well.
So they've just released, haven't they?
Yeah.
Well, sorry, that's a lie. They've not released it yet. They've started to announce.
That's right. They've announced it. It's going to be called the GR86. I think the Subaru one's still called a BRZ.
Yeah.
But Toyota have called, because it's Gazoo Racing is their racing department. It's like their M department.
Because Subaru and Toyota are connected, aren't they?
Yes.
So hence why it's the same car. But
so it's a Subaru engine, isn't it? It's a Boxer engine out of Subaru.
Yeah.
But the details are very sketchy. So it's it's a tiny bit heavier, a little bit more, but it's a bit more powerful. But the ingredients is the same. I don't think it is massively.
Oh, really?
From what pictures I've seen.
The only reason I say that is because cars are
they generally get bigger, don't they?
Yeah, getting bigger.
But for me, it's
more
just
power. Do you think?
A little bit, not hugely.
Okay.
You know, just very similar recipe. I think they've just updated it a little bit.
The car it kind of reminds me of a little bit is the MX-5. Now, I've been a massive fan of the MX-5 all my life. I think it's such a mega car, whether it's a race car or a road car. I think if you enjoy driving and you're more on a budget, like I am, it's a mega car, and it's great for training. It's a good all round car. So to be fair, I think this car is kind of in that sort of, would you say that sort of?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I think
league, let's say.
It is because the MX-5 again, cracking little thing to drive.
Yeah, and then you've got the Alpine as well, haven't you?
Yeah.
Which is kind of the A110.
The A110, which was a car they had an A110 back in the sort of 60s, which was a little rear engine thing. They're quite a bit more money though, the Alpines.
Oh, okay.
You're into Porsche territory a little bit, but
really?
But it's
they
are. Yeah, they're like 40-50 grand.
Oh, okay. Right, okay. So similar style.
But similar
car,
idea. Light, not much grip, not huge amounts of power, but beautifully. You know, all the journalists rave about the A110.
Yeah.
It's the same way they do about the GT86 as a road car. You know, it's they're so rare, these cars now.
Yeah.
Everything's heavy and slow, and you know.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about slow,
but powerful. You know.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to his name slipped my mind now. You know the chap who built the McLaren F1?
Oh, Gordon Murray,
Yeah, where he goes on and on about the importance of keeping it light.
Yes.
And cars, yes, are getting bigger and heavier, and we can get around that with electronics and more power and so on, but in some ways you still can't defy physics.
No.
In the fact that, you know, with a nice, light, nimble car, keeping it simple, I suppose.
Yeah,
is ultimately the best way to go if you want that kind of performance, I suppose.
Well, his new car has got the same footprint as a Boxster, hasn't it? It's tiny.
Exactly.
You look at it in a picture and you think, oh, that'll be the size of a transit van, like they always are, and it's the same size as a Boxster.
Yeah,
which is amazing. You know?
Absolutely.
Brilliant thing to do.
Yes, it'd be really interesting to see this because, of course, times are changing and we're getting more electric. There is talk, though, I know Porsche, and we've discussed this before, about this synthetic fuel.
Yeah.
Which I'll mention a little bit later, actually, because the Carrera Cup were running a form of that, weren't they?
Yeah, a mixture of it,
Yeah, exactly, which we'll explain about later. Yeah, so this, anyway, so going back to the GR86, that's going to be released, what, 2022?
22, they reckon, yeah.
Okay.
So hopefully we can get hands on one and...
Yeah, and test it out, and it would be lovely to do a road and track to see the difference. I know most people are driving these cars on the road, and that's the priority. But if you think MX-5, you ever met MX-5 National Championship, you have it worldwide, you know. So it'd be interesting to see.
Yes.
Really where that goes. So yeah, I think you know, for now that's kind of where our focus has been at for new cars that are being announced. Let's say at the moment, I know there's lots of new cars out there, but let's say more driver focused cars.
Well, that's exactly right. Well, that's why I thought I'd mention it, because yes, we could talk about McLarens and Ferraris and Porsches and all that kind of stuff, but for people you haven't got.
Yeah, like us, basically.
As
much as I really would love.
There are some good drivers' cars out there.
Well, my aim eventually is, you know, I'm going to have a GT3 sat on the driveway, manual.
I look forward to that.
At some point. But, yeah, so, absolutely. Okay, so moving on to the next section then. we thought we'd talk about driving. We normally put that a little bit sort of later on in our episodes, but we've had actually a lot of people asking questions, very curious about driving techniques. So we thought we'd bring that up a little bit earlier and talk about it.
Yeah.
So what are we covering this week, Rich?
Well, again, this has dropped out the fact that we've started to work again and started to do some in-car coaching of sort of common things that we come across when we're working with people. And people being a little bit behind the action, if you like, whether that's road or track, is a kind of common theme, and how we try and help people to deal with that. So getting yourself ahead of the car, and trying to engender that sort of relaxed concentration that we look for. So just looking at some of the ways that we try and do that, and the symptoms and the cure of that, really. So you tend to find if things are rushing up to people, and they're falling over themselves and getting flustered. Again, whether it's road or track, so on road it can be they're not picking up on hazards, or they're not seeing, they're not preparing themselves for corners or junctions, whatever it is they're coming to, because they're behind the action. Same on track, when everything's all a little bit rushed and they're not getting the timing right, and their inputs become a little bit harsh, a little bit digital. It's because they're not getting in front of what's going on.
So how do you alter that though?
Well, I think the first thing for me really is, and again, another thing that we talk about a lot, is where are you looking? You have a thing that you quite often say to people, where are you looking?
Yeah, I often ask people, because I think it's so inbuilt and subconscious, it's actually really hard to answer if you're being brutally honest with yourself. So it's one of the perhaps most simple things you can improve, but actually also one of the hardest, because it's so inbuilt, isn't it? So if you think for however long you've been driving, if you've not been looking far enough ahead for that entire time, actually it's really hard to suddenly change that. And again, it doesn't mean, I think sometimes people misunderstand and think, oh my god, I need to look all the way up in the distance continuously. It's not really like that. You're just trying to gain as much information as early as you can. So you're glimpsing back and forth, and that's the same road and track. Of course, on the road there is more information to gain, isn't there?
More complex, yeah.
Exactly. There's a lot more going on, and something I was talking about with a client of mine recently is looking at that information and tying that in. What clues can you get from that? What could you prepare yourself for coming up off of seeing, I don't know, in the distance a church or whatever it might be. It might mean there's a housing estate coming up, a village and people, or the bins are out, all sorts. So it can be in that way, or of course it can be road and track, where it's more about preparation and being ahead of the car.
Yes, and sort of creating time for yourself to deal with things. So on again, it works in both environments. Is concentrating on the technique rather than trying to concentrate on, for example, on track going quicker. Trying to get the technique right and get the timing of what you're doing right. That will create more time. In the same way, exactly as you said then, of getting people to look ahead and link what they're seeing to what they're doing in the car, so that they're getting further ahead of the action. Slowing it all down a little bit and giving themselves time. I think quite often when people are being coached, it's all new, so their brain's working faster and they're working at a more conscious level than they would when they're normally driving. So that can sometimes be part of it. But essentially, starting with the vision, getting yourself ahead, giving your brain chance to deal with things before they become a bigger problem. Yeah,
and then of course, and we've mentioned it on multiple podcasts, but also we're doing videos. We've recently actually just done a load, haven't we?
Yeah.
Of linking these techniques
bringing everything together. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can isolate these techniques, whether it's road and track, and focus on those and build it and build it and build it. And on the road, of course, that makes you ultimately a safer, smoother, better driver. Whether you want to drive obviously more spiritedly or not, it makes you a safer, better driver. And of course the same on track ultimately, isn't it?
It is, that's right, yeah.
You know, all the same techniques, try and isolate them individually. Don't chase speed, but isolate these techniques and then start to merge them together when it becomes more subconscious. Which is something we work a lot with clients. It seems to work really, really well, whereas the common mistake is people, especially on track of course, is, right, I want to drive fast, I want to be as fast as that guy over there, and just start to push. But of course if the techniques aren't there, then you're working incredibly hard, probably beyond what the car can do, because you're not setting the car up right, and it's all not really quite fitting together. So
you think, well, I can't go any faster because the car's at the limit, which it is.
Yeah,
but you need to change the way that you're communicating with the car and the way you're doing things.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's where setting the car up, and what we mean by that is you physically doing it, manipulating the car, setting the car up. You can then increase what the car is capable of. So it's not as simple as, I hear it all the time, especially people on driving tours and things. Well, I watched that guy go around that corner that quick, so I know I can. Well, technically, not necessarily, because you don't know how he set the car up to get the most out of the corner. It's exactly the same on track. It's like watching Lewis, you know. I'm sure Valtteri would love to say, well, I know I can do exactly the same, but actually doing it is another thing, and understanding exactly, especially at that level, to the detail of what he's doing, and then being able to replicate that. So, yeah, absolutely. So I would just say to anybody who's trying to improve, obviously there's lots of videos that we've got on our YouTube channel, there's things we've discussed obviously on the podcast, but whatever it is at the moment you're trying to aim for, try and focus on one thing at a time, but make sure the backbone vision is always there all the time whilst you build these other things in together, really. So our next section then, Motorsport, which we could probably talk about forever.
It was a bit of an epic weekend, really. We it was a bit some marathon TV sessions going on.
Yeah, well, a very special weekend for anybody who loves Formula One, because it was the Monaco Grand Prix.
Yes.
And I think that is probably the highlight on the calendar. Not always the most exciting of races, to be fair, because it's hard to overtake, but I think the general build-up, atmosphere, the fact that so many drivers actually live there now as well.
Yeah, it's easy for them to go home.
I just think it's one of those must-see on the calendar.
Yes.
So I suppose we should talk really perhaps about Ferrari first.
Yes, we go through the team. So start with Ferrari, and it was funny really because they, in the press conference, I can't remember who mentioned this. A couple of people said, I think it might have been Martin Brundle, I can't know, David Croft, I can't remember, that both drivers had a real stock answer. Well, we're hoping to be the third best team and we just want to do this and do. But sneakily knowing that their car was unbelievable on slow corners.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, which of course the next race is also a street race, and again normally one of the highlights of the year is Baku was the next one, but it's a street race. So Ferrari, are they going to be on fire? But they were absolutely on fire at Monaco.
Absolutely.
Weren't they?
I mean, one thing I will mention straight away is Sainz. Really, I think for me, we all know, or hopefully we all know, Leclerc is probably one of the best of all time. If you know his history of his junior ranks and what he's achieved, this is why Ferrari has signed him for such a long time. He's an incredible talent, and unfortunately, look what he did to Vettel. He as much as I'd love Sebastian Vettel, he destroyed him mentally, really. So the Sainz, I have to admit, personally, wasn't on my radar quite in the way that he is now. Milton Brundle said he was probably one of the most underestimated drivers in Formula One. Yeah. And he's come in and bang, he's straight on the pace of Leclerc. And there's none of this, so I've got to learn and get round the car. Because apparently every car is really quite different. It's like almost going to a different formula.
That's what he said. It's like changing category. That's what he said.
So huge adjustments. But something Lando Norris said about him, about Sainz, is that he has this ability to just drive around things, which I think the true greats do.
Yeah.
And that, I think he really showed that. So it was a shame for Ferrari, wasn't it? Because Leclerc.
Yeah. There was so much promise, wasn't there?
Yeah, Leclerc got pole. I'm sure for everybody that saw it.
And then he stuffed it.
Yeah, he stuffed it where they always stuff it, which is
the exit of the swimming pool.
Swimming pool, yeah. So there was this theory, or did he do it on purpose? Of course not. He, at the end of the day, destroyed the front, and the rear had a really heavy impact.
Well, we said as soon as because of the way it slapped the back of the car into the wall, we both said that's going to need a gearbox. Yeah. Because Schumacher had done the same coming into Casino Square. Yeah. And he'd hit soft barriers, and his gearbox was gone. Yeah. And so having clattered into the guardrail, it was always going to need a gearbox. But in actual fact, it was a drive shaft that broke. I don't really understand that. But
this is the thing, and I don't know, we'll probably get more updates, I suppose, today. But in fairness to Ferrari, because everybody was up in arms saying, why did they take the risk? They said they wouldn't take the risk, and they have, and of course, the gearbox. But Leclerc straight away said it's not the gearbox. And then they came in, tested everything, and it was something on the rear left, which still could be connected to the crash, but it wasn't the gearbox.
Because it's the other side of the car.
Some big investigating to do. So in fairness to Ferrari, it actually wasn't quite as how would you put it? People were being very judgmental, I suppose, of what the decisions they've made. But to be fair to them, I actually think there was some harsh luck there. But off the back of that, in qualifying, it did affect, of course, the pole laps for Valtteri Bottas. He was looking really, really strong, wasn't he?
They were all on purples, weren't they?
Of course,
they were all,
Max
all
Verstappen.
rather.
Yeah, but of course Sainz as well.
Yeah, he was really quite angry, wasn't he? Sainz?
Yeah, and not angry with Leclerc, just frustrated that he
The
always goes
situation.
well round there. And that's the thing is, Monaco seems to suit certain individuals. And nobody says it really suits the stellar drivers, like Senna and so many. But on that note, interestingly, one of the most stellar drivers of all time, Hamilton, has never really quite gelled with the place.
No, he hasn't. No.
Now, in fairness, he's had 2 poles and 3 wins, so
Yeah.
he's certainly done
He's
better
always
than
been in a
most.
front-running car, yeah.
Let's say that. But let's say on Hamilton standards, qualifying P7, and really just kind of initially struggling in the race.
Yeah. Well, Mercedes just had a horrible weekend, didn't they? Really.
Yeah, they did, unfortunately. I mean, he actually, in fairness, in the race, he broke the race lap record, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
So, of course, the pace
Which wasn't far
there.
off his qualifying time. It was properly quick.
Yeah.
In the middle of a race.
Yeah, and of course, middle of a race, it's a totally different story.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to get his thoughts on why he doesn't quite seem to gel with Monaco, because a driver of his, what would you call it?
Calibre.
Yeah, calibre. It's for me, it's just really interesting. But one thing then on that note, of course, with Mercedes is Bottas. How unlucky was Bottas?
I mean, when does that? So essentially, he came to the pits and the wheel nut cross-threaded and then shredded all the threads off the thing. When does that ever happen?
I know. I just feel like Bottas.
And he wasn't going to win, I don't think, but he got second place in the bag pretty much.
And he massively outperformed Hamilton. Now
all
I know
weekend, consistently.
I know he doesn't do that every weekend, but actually, Karun Chandok, he had an interesting point about Bottas, that he feels Bottas doesn't get enough credit because there aren't many people on this planet that can out-qualify or outperform Lewis Hamilton.
No.
And okay, Valtteri doesn't do it on every single occasion, but he can do it. That's the thing. And quite often in testing and then all the way up to Q3, quite often he's ahead of him, isn't he? And Lewis just has this ability when it's the ultimate pressure to pull something out of the bag. But so I do think people need to be a bit fairer to Valtteri, that he is against, at the moment, the most established, best driver in Formula 1 right at this moment in time.
But it's just typical of his luck when there was a result on the cards.
Yeah, it all goes wrong.
His pole got knackered because of the Leclerc crash, and then they shredded the front wheel.
Yeah, just very unlucky. So I suppose we should mention, of course, McLaren.
Yeah, because talking about drivers who go well around Monaco, one of the people almost as Monaco specialist, but it's a bit unfair, is Ricciardo.
Yeah, and it's been a real shock. I think mostly for him, but for all of us, because we all know how good Ricciardo is. Again, he's got a great pedigree. Look at him through the junior ranks.
Yeah.
And look at everything he's done in every single Formula 1 team up to now. He did push Verstappen. He beat Verstappen at times. He went to Renault and pretty much destroyed Hülkenberg.
Yeah.
Which is
once he got into his stride, off he went.
Absolutely. He was dominant with Ocon.
Yeah.
And it's just like something isn't right.
So something's fundamentally not right there, I think.
And it almost makes me wonder, and I know this sounds daft because it's a Formula 1 team and surely it can't be, but you think, I mean, is the tub cracked? Is there something to this? Because I didn't expect Ricciardo to come in and walk all over Norris, because Norris is an unbelievable talent. But I did expect him to be closer. We're not talking like second here, or more. He actually got lapped by Norris in the race, which must be probably one of the most painful things you could have happen to you at that level.
But what doesn't make sense, and this is the thing with Ricciardo, because bearing in mind he's quicker, he was always quicker than Verstappen round there. So he knows how to drive Monaco, and he said he would cross the line and think, yeah, that was a good lap, and he'd be a second off Norris, and he was like, and he could see he's like, I don't understand.
Yeah,
I don't know what to say now. That's basically where he's at, isn't he?
Yeah, and I just think something's going to come out here. There's something more to it. I don't think you don't forget how to drive.
No.
And Ricciardo is unbelievably strong mentally. He isn't as, how do you put this, as fragile as, let's say, Vettel. No. Vettel is an unbelievable world-class driver, but he's mentally a little bit fragile, a bit more like Valtteri in that sense. I don't think that's the case for Ricciardo. So, it'll be interesting to see. On the note, though, of Vettel, great, wasn't it?
He drove well. He had a good weekend.
Yeah, so he finished 5th. I mean...
He drove really well.
Yeah.
Like, fended off. Came out of the pits alongside Gasly, didn't he? And going up the hill.
Yeah.
Fended him off.
Yeah. I think we're seeing the old Vettel. And I think that's because... I mean, I say the old Vettel. Vettel's always been the same, but mentally his head dropped, and this is something we talk about a lot, isn't it? Is mental composure, and it's something that isn't a big enough focus. It's getting better in Formula One, but could be better within the junior ranks all the way up, dealing with this mental pressure.
But yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, this weekend he was significantly quicker than Stroll.
Yeah, and I think that shows the quality of what Vettel really is.
Yeah.
But we can't forget to mention Max, of course.
Yeah.
Max
he was brilliant
did
in the game, wasn't he?
everything he needed to do.
Cool, calm, collected.
Absolutely. He was aggressive at the start because he didn't really get the great start. But he said he didn't feel it was anything of his doing or the car. It's just he was on the wrong side of the grid. And when they're racing, they spend less time on that side, so there's less rubber, so therefore... harder to get away, simple as that. But he shut the door on Valtteri, but aggressive but fair.
Yeah.
It wasn't like Valtteri had to come out of the gas, but he wasn't alongside him or anything, so it was up to Valtteri to give it up.
Yeah,
and from that point on, he managed it perfectly, didn't he? And I think he's really starting to show his class now. And if Red Bull can remain strong, it would be nice to see a good fight between them and Mercedes, wouldn't it?
Would you?
And see it go down to the wire for a change. I have nothing against Mercedes at all, but it'd just be nice. It's
nice to see a shake.
Of course, any of us as spectators and fans, you just want to see it close, right? So
Yeah.
really, really brief look then at Formula 2. So Formula 2 obviously follows Formula 1. It doesn't follow every round, but it was at Monaco.
No.
And I've got somebody that I'm a very, very big fan of, and I was in FIA Formula 3. Is Pourchaire, isn't it?
Yes, and the interesting thing for me was our conversation we had with Johnny Edgar, the Red Bull Junior, about how hard it is now because they get no testing.
Yeah.
Then they get like half an hour to learn the track, and
yeah.
So which I said that last year's FIA F3 championship was a real strong one because you had Piastri, you had Lawson, they've all come in to F2 and they're at the front of that now, and Pourchaire.
Yeah, Theo Pourchaire.
It's almost a standout.
Yeah, he's only 17 years old. He did really, really well in FIA Formula 3. Over the year, he got stronger and stronger and stronger.
Yeah, he nearly nicked it at the end, didn't he?
Yeah, and he's French. He lives apparently only about half an hour from Monaco.
He lives in Cannes, doesn't he, I think?
So he classes Monaco as his home Grand Prix. So he qualified on pole for the main feature race.
By quite a long way.
Yeah, it was quite astonishing actually. Because, at that level, they're so good.
Yeah.
Even John Edgar was saying, wasn't he, when he did Formula 4, there was quite big gaps with the pace, and then he said in Formula 3, it's like, whoa, okay, everybody's unbelievably
time,
close. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And of course, you get to F2, it's even worse.
Yeah.
But
we get all the chaff by that point.
Yeah, he was astonishing, wasn't he? So he did an amazing pole lap.
He said he took his brain out.
And he is probably one of the most, I wouldn't say most passionate, but he shows his passion, doesn't he?
You can see he loves it. He's quite emotional, isn't he?
Yeah, and I love seeing that because I feel like too many of the drivers aren't allowed to show their true emotions, and it's great to see somebody, I suppose a little bit like Danny Ricciardo, but in a very different way. But that flamboyant kind of personality. And then race 2 was it was a bit more tricky, wasn't it, because of the weather?
Yes. So they've got this new format of Formula 2, haven't they? Which I like. I'm reading things on Twitter. There's certain people who know the sport intimately and have got a lot of respect for it that don't like it because they don't understand how you've qualified 12th and now you're at the bottom pole. But I quite like it because there's no, in the top 12 of a Formula 2 race, there's no tuggers, as we would say, is there? Yeah. They're all good.
Oh, absolutely.
Race 1 was a bit of they kind of set off and finished in the order they set off in.
Yeah.
Race 2, though, was a stonker Saturday morning.
Yeah.
In the wet. It started off wet.
And Lawson,
he drove brilliantly. Did an overtake, which doesn't happen.
Which is hard. It's hard at Monaco, that's for sure. And to be honest, he just managed the race perfectly.
He did.
But sadly, he got disqualified, didn't he, afterwards?
He did.
And it was for starting on the wrong engine map, I believe.
Yeah, there's some rule you have to start in map 1 which doesn't mean anything to me, but they have to start in map 1 and then change it.
And let's say, for example, he starts in map 2. It was something like that.
It was that stupid.
He didn't gain anything off the start. He overtook Piastri later on. It just seemed unbelievably harsh, let's say, to take that victory away.
So he lost his win.
Especially at Monaco. I know the rules are the rules, but you think, you could penalise him in a different way, I suppose. But hey, it happened. And then, of course, the feature race. So that's like the big.
So that was one after qualifying
big
on the
deal.
So they did 70 laps on Saturday round there in the Formula 2.
Exhausting, really.
Yeah.
And of
no
course,
power steering.
Who showed how great they were again?
Prix,
yeah.
And he did just. And there was a lot of virtual safety cars in that.
And he managed
just
it
pulled
perfectly.
the gap every time. Bang, off he went.
So I really.
He's
a
Sauber Junior.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what happens to him. But I really have high hopes for him, I think. And not just because of his driving ability, but he's just be incredibly marketable. And I think we need a bit of that. We need a bit of that, really.
We do.
So one thing I just want to mention before we move on to Indycar is the Super Cup. It was the
first round of the Porsche Super Cup. Yeah.
Just a couple of things really. So Larry Ten Voorde is back in it. So he won Super Cup last year.
He's the reigning champion.
And he also won the German Carrera Cup. And last year he did some endurance races as well.
Did Le Mans, didn't he?
Yeah.
Because he did Le Mans. He did the Porsche race.
Yeah.
And he did the 24 hours, didn't he? If you remember, which he won that, and then he put it out.
He's so impressive as a driver. So he's back again. He was incredibly dominant, no question. He broke the lap record. Massively impressive. There was a lot of carnage in the race, so it was red flagged, wasn't it, initially?
Yeah.
But I won't go into all the details of that. But it's definitely, if you get a chance, watch it.
Yeah.
It is actually for a Super Cup race round Monaco, where the cars are so wide, it's hard to overtake. Actually, it was a really good race.
It was.
But one thing I wanted to mention was Harry King. So
yes.
Harry King has won the UK Carrera Cup, GB Carrera Cup. He's doing that again this year, but he's also doing Super Cup. And he qualified 10th and finished 9th, which was pretty amazing, really.
Because the other person that stood out to me was Boccolacci. He was the other rookie. Yeah. Now he's got more experience than Harry King because he's done F2 and he's to race at Monaco. But he was bang on it, wasn't he?
Yeah. But bear in mind, Harry King doesn't know Monaco.
No.
So.
Oh, Harry, and he's not. He's done Ginettas and Carrera Cup. That's all he's done.
Yeah, exactly. I honestly think he's incredibly special driver, and I know I've gone on about it, but he really is. So it'd be interesting to see him this year.
See how that plays out
in the GB Carrera Cup.
Because he's got Camish. He's got Camish. That could be worth watching.
Absolutely. So we'll move on to IndyCar then.
Yeah, biggest motor race on the planet.
Yeah, it is.
And apparently the biggest sporting event in the world since the start of the pandemic.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they were saying it's 135,000 people. It's a capacity. It's the biggest stadium in the world.
Yeah.
And the capacity is 300,000. But Roger Penske, who owns it, has said 40%. So 135,000 people are going to be there. So that's cool.
Yeah, and I really, really want to go see it live. It's I have to admit, and I've said it before, I watched IndyCar a lot as a kid, and then it obviously must have changed where it was being aired. I lost touch, and now back in touch and watch it all the time. And for me, they are probably some of the most rounded drivers on the planet.
Oh, without doubt.
Because they have to do ovals, street circuits, race circuits, the lot. And it's just so impressive. But you see how fast they are. So they're averaging like 230 something miles an hour. You know,
yeah, pole times are 231.6 mile an hour. Average over 4 laps.
Average, yeah. It's just
so not even one
amazing.
Lap. And the thing for me is that yes, F1's the pinnacle.
Yeah.
But there's huge amounts of talent bottled up trying to get in there. So some of it bursts sideways and ends up in America.
Absolutely. And this is the thing I hate is, and one thing, I know hate's a strong word, but when we watch the Drive to Survive, the F1 thing, was it Will Buxton? Nothing against Will at all, but kept saying, these are the best drivers in the world. And I felt like saying, no, there's some of the best drivers in the world. Because not all get the opportunity to do Formula 1, but that does not mean they're any less of a driver.
No,
and
not at all.
You see a lot of F1 drivers move over to Indycar and don't find it easy. Alonso, first year he qualified in the top 9, didn't he? The first 9. But he had an unfortunate situation, I know. But in the second year, didn't even qualify for it. Grosjean has adapted really, really well. But it's just amazing what these drivers can do. But yeah, Penske's a bit of a story, isn't it? Yeah.
So Penske, for those who don't know, that if you think about the biggest racing teams in the world, so people like Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes, F1. Penske, you've got in America, you've got people like Penske who are massive. I mean, he's one of the biggest organisations on the planet, and mind anything else as a company. You've got Penske, you've got Chip Ganassi, you've got Andretti, are the 3 big teams there, aren't they?
Yeah.
So Penske are a powerhouse of motorsport generally. Anybody who's got Penske dampers on their racing car, anybody that's watching will know. Penske are huge, but they just. It seems that their race pace was fine, relatively, but they couldn't get the cars to run in qualifying.
Yeah, which is a real shame actually, because they were all doing so well in testing, weren't they?
Yeah.
And it all just went a bit wrong. So there's 4 main cars, isn't there?
Yes.
Penske, and there's one that's a partner Penske car.
Yes.
So that means it's run by another team, but supported by Penske.
Yes.
Is that right?
Which is quite cool because it's an all female team.
Yes. Yeah.
Not quite all female yet, but So it's owned by a lady called Beth Peretta, who I think owns restaurants and things. But anyway, so and they've got a female driver called Simona Di Silvestro. He's brilliant. He's done lots of IndyCar racing. She's quick on ovals, and
she's actually a works Porsche driver.
Yeah, so she's good driver.
She's done a lot. She's very, very established.
So, and in the race practices, because they do so many miles down there, she's bang on there with all the other Penske drivers.
Yeah.
But it turned out that from just listening to what the commentators say, it's so hard to prepare 4 cars identically or 5 cars identically. So you'd got 2 of the Penske cars were in the show. And Will Power, who's an Indy 500 winner and champion, was out the bottom with Simona.
Yeah, struggling to qualify.
Yeah.
They both did achieve it, didn't
they both scraped in. And they both said their race cars are fine. They're not worried about the race. Yeah. They were just terrified they weren't going to get in the race.
Yeah, and but that shows how important the car is for the 500.
Yeah.
It basically, these cars, you need to be able to touch it with your fingernail, and it should roll and roll and roll and roll and roll. No friction, no nothing. All stripped out. Stripped back. And it's bizarre because you think, well, how can you be so good one year and not the next? But I suppose a bit like Formula 1, not quite as extreme, but it is evolving all the time, isn't it?
Yeah.
And teams find more tricks and ways to evolve.
Yeah.
And you can end up on the back foot. But yeah, so they've got in, haven't they?
Yes.
Interestingly, there's some older drivers in it that are doing incredibly well.
Well, I think because on the face of it, you think, well, we've got to do is keep your foot down and turn left, but it's so hard. And again, listening to them, how you prepare the tyres.
Yeah. And basically, you don't do that, do you? You're not just flat out.
No, they're not.
Left.
And what line they use, because they were saying about Castro Neves, how he takes a completely different line, but it gets the speed out of the car. Yeah. So some of the older guys, it's the experience, because Tony Kanaan, who's standing in. So there's a guy called Jimmy Johnson who we've mentioned before, who's a 7-time NASCAR champion, so he's a legend in American motor racing. And at the age of 48, he's decided he's going to go to IndyCars. Yeah. Just because he wants to. So he's doing the normal tracks, the roads and the streets, and Tony Kanaan is doing the ovals. Tony Kanaan is a similar kind of age. I think he's 47, 48, isn't he?
Yeah, so yeah. I think 47, and Castro Neves is 45.
Yes, so there you go. So the older guys, and this the amount of experience you need.
Yeah.
At Indy, because Castroneves is, I think he pretty much thinks he's going to win it.
Yeah.
Which will be the fourth time he wins if he does.
What I also love about this is we've got, and I've said it before, a bit obsessed with age. They've got to be 15, 16. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with putting them in young, but you think you don't need to then retire at 30, you know, and that's the thing that I dislike, because it just proves it. How many drivers do we see in endurance racing or in Indycar, whatever, that are established older drivers, yet at the front winning races, pushing all the time? I mean, well, Dixon's on pole.
Yeah, exactly.
How old's
he's
Dixon?
40.
There you go. And he's on pole on how many?
Six championships, yeah.
Fourth IndyCar pole, you know, been fastest all through practice. He's 40. Yeah. So point being, and these cars are unbelievably hard to drive. They're like old school Formula 1 cars, aren't they?
Heavy,
they're very physical cars. So yeah, I think it's a real kind of proving point that great, start them young, but it doesn't mean they need to be pushed out, you know, too early on. You could have a very long, successful career doing it.
Because obviously then with the old guys, you've then got some of the young. You've got three of the young guards in there.
About 20,
the new youth
21.
movement, as they call it. Yeah, because Tony was saying Tony Kanan's doing his 20th Indy 500, and two cars in front of him. The guys are 20 that drive the cars. So like he said, they were in diapers when he was doing his first Indy 500. How he described it.
Yeah, that's kind of mad, isn't cool. It, really?
But I mean, the young guys. I mean, like we were saying about Palau and VK, like just so brave. Like VK, you know, had a shunt, didn't he, in the practice a few months ago, broke his finger, and then there he is again. He's doing 231 mile an hour laps. You know, proper.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it always reminds me of old school Formula 1, really.
Yes.
You know, it has that danger, which is actually just before we finish the topic. Grosjean, of course, is doing IndyCar, but he's not doing the ovals.
No.
Which is understandable. Obviously, he almost got killed in F1, and you know, gosh, how safe is Formula 1 now? And I don't know if that's his decision, family decision, but he has sort of started to say would like to do the 500. So you never know, next year you might see him doing that as well. Hey?
But because the thing for me, and Grosjean will be the first one to back this up. Don't let anybody kid you that the level's not as good as F1.
Oh, absolutely! It's so frustrating. You only get the odd tweet or something that people say that, and anybody that really knows about the sport knows that's so not the case.
No, not at all.
So anyway, so our next little section then is our interactive section where we ask each other and ask everybody else that listens and or watches. So what's the question this week?
So our question this week then is: if you could attend one major motorsport event, what would it be and why? Over to you.
Oh, it's
well,
I'll just sit there. Problem is, I think we have had a similar question like this, and I'm sure I've said the same place. I'm trying to think of something different now. So I know what I'm going to say. So for me, it would actually be Bathurst for the Aussie supercars.
Yeah, get that.
Because Bathurst is a track I've never driven. This is to watch, is it?
Yes.
So when you say attend, it's not driving?
No.
Oh. Okay. Well, still, anyway, I'll still go with it. I've only ever driven it on a sim, but it looks cracking. I love the Aussie V8 supercars. I mean, gosh, there's so many other motorsport forms that I'd love to cover, but I just feel and fear it would be too much about motorsport without other things. So we had to make some decisions on what we were covering, didn't we? But for me, I think because the class of the quality of it's a bit like, I don't know, their equivalent of would you say British touring car, but a higher.
Well, it's a different level. Continent, so it's more like NASCAR in America, I would say.
Yeah, so
it's bigger than BTCC.
Oh yeah, and obviously big manufacturers in it. And,
full of pros, not people with money.
Yeah. In other words, proper pros. Nothing against BTCC all the way, but proper pros. And what I love is it's so close, so much overtaking, but it's really clean. Which is unusual, let's say, for those sort of cars. If you do compare it to something like BTCC or something like that. It's, you know, a bit of a smash fest, and it's just, I just love seeing quality racing, I suppose. So yeah, that would be my answer. What about you?
Well, I mean, the thing, I absolutely adore Goodwood. So whether it's the Revival or the Festival of Speed, but I've been so fortunate over my career to have been to both of those. So that would be, you know, I'd go to Goodwood every time. But I suppose the one I've never been to, and it's always a bit of a surprise to you, is the Le Mans 24 Hours.
Yeah.
And I'd love to go to that.
Yeah, well, hopefully you'll be driving it instead.
Yeah.
Your first time there, honestly, that would be great, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that
Wonder
be
what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah, so next week then, so is what, the Indy 500, isn't it?
Indy 500 next week.
Yeah, so as you were saying, biggest
Have
event.
a look at that bad boy.
So that should
Get some
be
beers and
really,
some snacks lined up for that.
yeah, really interesting, because we've actually got, I won't mention who yet, but we've got an IndyCar driver coming on the show.
Yes.
After the 500, so that's going to be great. And of course, naturally, I always have my fingers crossed for him anyway.
Yes.
But even more so now, because I'm hoping
My
he's got
T-shirt
some,
will be a clue as to.
great stories lined up. So we've got him coming on the show. We've also got a very young Carter who's coming up through the ranks.
Oh yeah, like really young. Yeah.
Yeah, really young lad, but really driven and passionate. Because that thing is, you know, we want to get people from all parts of the industry, you know, whether it's team bosses, up and coming drivers, retired drivers, current at the top of their game, fitness coaches. Actually, we've got a fitness coach which we keep mentioning, but he is coming on.
He's busy.
You know, but he is coming on. So there's just to really give people an insight into the world of, you know, not just of motorsport, but the industry in general, right?
Yeah.
So we've got all of that kind of coming up. Also, we're going to be filming some more driving tips. I'm going to get an opportunity, or we both are, to do a little bit of driving, a bit of drifting as well.
Yeah.
So we're going to try and record that, and then you can have a little watch. And yeah, you can try and rate it out of 10.
Yeah.
See if I'm any good or not, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thanks so much for listening, and we